I don't know why I've just done that on this. That's the live stream, isn't it?
It's all right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. And we've got another great show for you today. And you may notice Mr. Hooley's face is looking a little bit smaller than usual today, from his loft as usual. And that is because he has kind of broken his laptop, I think. Who knows what he gets up to on that up in the loft. But he's got his phone working, and that's the important thing. He is with us, so that's good. So let me start off, before we introduce this week's guest, with the sponsor this week. And it's a slightly different scenario because we're actually recording in the morning as opposed to when we normally record in the evening. So our beer sponsor may be a little bit different, but it's not stopping us. So this week's beer sponsor is... J.A. Martin, author of erotica, and at J.A. Martin 1973. Her book Open Windows is 99 cents and it's only available on Kindle. Newly divorced Caroline can't keep her eyes off her hands to herself when she sees the naughty young couple next door making poolside love. And someone said this story was amazing. Really got me and my wife back back in the swing of things, that review says, and it is shortened up. So... Thank you very much.
I love how red you've done already, mate.
I don't know what it is. I can't help it. So let me show you. Yeah, the book is popping up here. Open Windows. Fantastic cover, you know.
Wow,
it's, she's probably cold on that floor, to be honest, because, you know, it looks like a nice, a rough wooden floor. And she hasn't got much on her knees there, so... and
the windows are open.
Yeah, open windows, yeah. So thank you very much. And I will pop that book up in the top corner. When I find it. Where is that gone? Good start to the show, eh? As always. And there it is. Mr. Hooley, you can look up now.
Wow.
Thank you for sponsoring that. And the descriptions and the links will all be in our show notes and on YouTube and the podcast as well. So, just so you know, no beer because it's the morning time, but we do have a nice freshly ground coffee. So thank you very much. So, without further ado, let's get today's guest on because we're very excited. And the books that this man has released, well, the book that he's released has done exceptionally well. And we will talk in depth about that soon. And he has a book coming out on the 1st of October, which is also very exciting. So, without any more hesitation and any more mumbling of me, welcome to the show, Stu.
Hey, so how are you going?
Where are we going?
How are you going? Where are we going? Where are you taking me this morning after the J.A. Martin reveal? I'm like, what is this? What books do you think I've written here?
Well,
I'm very curious.
This is our first sponsor that is in that genre, so we're quite happy to receive that. And I have been sent a copy, so I'll let you know what it's like. Oh dear me, we've lost sound. Are you there?
I'm here, yeah. Can you hear
me?
You're
back. That's good. Sorry, we just lost you momentarily. So, hello Stu, how's it going?
Yeah, bloody brilliant, thanks mate. Yeah, it could be my high-pitched, almost Scouse voice. Can't be picked up by the device I'm using. That sometimes happens.
Wow, it's fantastic.
So, Stu, let's talk a little bit about the book then that's coming out. Okay. Tell us why you decided to write this book, and are you nervous about the sort of hype that's surrounding this book because of the success of the first one?
Should I go in reverse? Because the hype thing that's nothing to do with me, right? Like, so that's completely divorced from me. So I don't notice it at all because, you know, it's like in anything, if you're even a bit successful, there's always someone who's far more successful than you. So like, as much as like people look forward to the book, there's still, you know, there's a J.K. Rowling around the corner. There's like 200 million other authors around the corner who are getting more press and more publicity. So I try not to worry about it too much. Just trying to write like the best story I genuinely can. The idea for the book and the other stuff is just going, honestly, mate, just to be as far away from Seven Deaths as possible. Like, Seven Deaths was like, I had so many people expecting me to write 8 deaths or 9 deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and just like, honestly, just keep doing it and keep doing it. And thankfully, the only people who didn't want that were like my publisher and my agent. They were both perfectly happy for me to go and write a Sherlock Holmes at sea book, basically. So that was honestly the start of it. It was just like, I don't want to do that. I want to move genre. I want a body. I want an investigation, because I like writing those and that was fun. But everything else, I want to change it completely. I should have gone for erotica. That's what I now realise. But like maybe book 3.
Yeah, they definitely sell well.
Yeah, that'd be a subtle change, wouldn't it? Stu Turton, after the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, releases his new 50 Shades of Death book.
Yeah, the 7 Lasses.
7 Lasses of Evelyn Hardcastle. Oh, yeah, that's a bit saucy, isn't it? That'd be pretty great.
So what made you want to completely change genre and move away from that book that was obviously so successful?
Because it's hard, mate. Like, writing's not a natural thing to me, weirdly. Like, the actual writing I totally enjoy, but sitting down at a computer for 8 hours a day, the discipline of writing, the fact that is what you have, there's no other way to write a book apart from sitting in front of your computer for long stretches of time. And that is not what I enjoy doing. That's not who I am as a person. I'd much rather be outside, like running, hiking, swimming, climbing. Like, so every time I sit down, I've got to be massively entertained. Like, it sounds a weird thing to say, but like, when I write books, I only ever write the bits. I write the bits first that I want to be writing, the enjoyable bits, and I push all the bits that I don't want to the end. So like, and it takes me 2 years. So if you can imagine my writing process is about 1.5 years of writing basically dialogue and action scenes, and then 6 months of writing exposition, because I hate exposition. So it'll be like, and that is the way they divvy up. So if I'm not having a good time when I sit down at the computer, I just won't do it. I'll just procrastinate. I'll go and do something else. So if I was writing the 8 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, it just wouldn't. I've done it. I did my best with that concept. I did my best with those characters and that idea, and I pushed that as far as I could to the edges. I don't see what more I could do with it, to be honest. I mean, obviously, there's people who hated the book who can tell me a lot of what I could have done more with it. But for me personally, that was exactly the book I wanted to write. And I felt the same about Devil, my second book, now The Devil in the Dark Water. I felt like all the elements of that, I pushed them as far as I possibly could. I got as much out of that idea as I could. So I'd never go back to this one either, as much as some people would quite like me to.
So how do you feel when you've kind of set a trend, like, because I noticed obviously with 7 Deaths, there's like loads of people that were suddenly like doing the same structured stories, but you'd obviously set the trend with that. So how do you feel about that?
OS. That's how I should preface this by saying that when 7 Deaths was finished, 7 Deaths was successful, right? So for the first time in my life, I had some money in my bank account. So I took the opportunity to move house, and we took the opportunity to start a family. That was a huge mistake when you're trying to write your second book, because having a baby and writing a book are basically the same thing. And it was incredibly difficult to do both, especially the way I write books, which is kind of like, I plan them for 3 months and then I hold all the information in my head, right? Like, so it's all just, and then if I need to make changes, I change on the fly as I write, and I don't refer back to the planning documents too much. And the other thing is I plan for plot, so the entire plot is planned out completely, but the characters I find in the writing, and then I alter the plot if the characters wouldn't do those things that I demand they do, right? That's kind of how I sort of juggle my book. So it's a bit of planning and it's a bit of pantsing. You can't do that if you've only had 2 hours sleep a night. Like, it just doesn't work. You can't hold the information in your head. Like, I couldn't remember when my daughter was newborn what I'd written the day before, so I couldn't possibly follow it up the day after. I also don't write in chronological order, so I'll write chapter 70 if that's the chapter that appeals to me that day. I couldn't remember what chapter 70 was, let alone what chapter 1 was. So for the first year of writing that book, it was a muddled mess. So if you can imagine, I can't hold the book in my head. You can imagine I had no idea what was happening in the world around me. Like, I wasn't checking the news. I wasn't like seeing what was happening with the book. I wasn't keeping up with sales. Nothing. I just didn't pay attention. So I generally felt that after about a year and a half, when I came back to publishing and started writing, because I threw away that first draft after a year. And that was about, I'd say, confidently 130,000 words. I just tossed it. kept about 16,000 of it, and started again. And then you're just like head down, just running at a deadline, because I missed. What did I miss? I'd say I missed 4 deadlines on this book. It was supposed to be out last summer, but yeah, I had mate. So if there was a trend, I completely missed it. But yeah, good luck to anybody else who was trying to write this book, because we should be in some sort of survivors club. Because writing something like 7 Deaths was a miserable experience.
So what's the process with, I guess, your publishers when you're missing deadlines? What is their thought on that? Are they thinking, okay, you know what you're doing, and they want you to get the best work out possible, or are they more concerned about your deadline?
No, their best work. They were very much the best work, and also they knew my situation, so they knew that I just had this newborn baby. Not to go too much into it, but she also had health complications, so there was that was overriding it. So no, everyone around me was superb, mate. Like everybody was just like, just do what you can when you can. When I missed the deadline, it was like, well, when do you think you can get this first draft? And so I'd name another deadline, then I'd miss that one, then it would be like, so it was just it was an awful experience. It was awful for them, because obviously they've got an entire process they've got to get in motion. Like they've got to get designers on this and all these other things. Marketing's got to gear up. But I never felt the stress of that from my publisher or even my agent. I never felt that like there was this shadow hovering over me. I was just writing the best I could when I could while getting all this other stuff done. And to be honest, like it's not what I wanted, because it's my second book, and I genuinely believe second book is your career. The first book can be a fluke. The second book is the one where you establish yourself as somebody that people want to read. So I wanted to give this my all. Life just meant I couldn't, and I think they all got that, and it was fairly low down on my list of priorities for a while.
So next time Stu Turton makes a book, your publisher's like, well, we're giving this deadline, but in reality, let's give a 3 months buffer just in case.
That is exactly what's happened. That is entirely what's happened. It's been like, I can't remember what's in the contract, but it's like 15 months, could be 18 months, but it's 18 months.
Brilliant.
So this whole idea for book 2, did that come before baby was born, or was that during the chaos there?
It was before. I had the idea when I was 23. So I'd been backpacking around Australia, got stranded because I'm an absolute dickhead, right? So when I go, half of what I just travelled. So when I left university, went travelling for 5 years. Came back home. Like I told everyone I was gone for 6 months and just didn't come back for 5 years.
Wow.
And then I came back and had successive jobs and was always travelling in the meantime, so I'd earn a bit of money for travelling again. So that's kind of like the inspiration for all of my books, I think, is going to come from trips I've done and travelling. But this one, I backpacked all the way across Australia, and my flight out was from Perth and I was flying into Singapore. Except it fucking wasn't, was it? My flight out was out of Darwin, which is like 5,000 miles away on the wrong end of the country, and it was on a different day anyway. So I went to the wrong part of the country to get a flight out that didn't exist. So I ended up in Perth. The airline was decent, so they were just like, we'll put you on a standby and get you out. So I ended up going to like the Maritime Museum just to kill some time, and I saw like this. There was an exhibition there about the wreck of the Batavia, which it turns out is quite famous, but I'd never heard of it. And it's astonishingly ugly tale. Like I recommend everyone look it up, because it's the best story. Like as a piece of it would be an awful piece of fiction in the sense that like it's gut wrenching and it's hard, but it's got everything. So it's about a ship, 1629, ship gets wrecked off the coast of Australia. The captain goes off. They're 30 days away from Indonesia, from, where was it? Jakarta. So he takes his longboat, just a longboat, and his senior crew, and he goes off to get help. And that's celestial navigation, right? Uncharted waters, celestial navigation. He manages to get himself all the way to Jakarta. What he doesn't know is he's left the survivors of the shipwreck, in the hands of a psychopath. And this psychopath like ended up butchering, maiming, murdering, and he did it through a cult of personality. He never killed anyone himself. He convinced these other men who were in his thrall to do it on his behalf. By the end of it, they were just bludgeoning people on the beach for fun. Like it was it's awful. But then this soldier who was there, he managed to start a resistance. He built a fort on a second island. He ran running battles with the psychopath and this cult. He managed to get some passengers to safety. There was this noble woman there who was like incredibly strong, did all these things to survive. Like all these wonderful stories actually within this overall terrible story. So I read that and was just enthralled, but I couldn't do it. I was 23 and I didn't even know I was going to be an author. So but it stuck with me. It was one of those stories that just gets lodged in you. and I just carried it around. And after 7 deaths, as I was saying, I was looking for something just completely different, and that was the core of it. I was just like, well, that's what I've wanted to write for ages because it's such good, but I can't do that. It's too bleak. Like I don't want to fictionalize that true story. But I wanted that setting. I wanted the boat. I wanted the period. I wanted some of the characters. Even I put those in my story. I completely fictionalized them internally, but a lot of what they did is there. So it was that kind of weird blend of just this seemed like the best thing to be doing after 7 deaths. It kind of exactly fit what I wanted to do. Yeah, so thankful. And actually, I'm writing book. I've just started book 3, and it's a similar sort of thing. So we'll talk about that in a couple of years because they're very similar. Like trotting around the world, getting a bit lost, coming across something, and being like, "Oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do next." Brilliant.
So, have you got any ideas for future trips that might inspire stories of yours?
If I can go on future trips the way the world is at the moment, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even like that's the bit. Me and my wife's a travel journalist as well, so it's such a big part of our lives, and it's a big part of our daughter's life as well. But we want it to be a big part of her life. We just can't go anywhere. Like my wife's Australian. We'd love to get back to Australia. We usually go there for January, February, just to ride out the winter a little bit. And we just can't do it, and we can't go on any of these little trips. And they're so important to the way we live our life. It's really interesting to sort of, because I know for a lot of people traveling is kind of a luxury, but for us it's just something we've always done. We just always nip off for weekends. It's like we'll jump on a train, Eurostar, we'll jump on a cheap flight, go to Italy or go to Europe, and it's weird to be without it, especially when you're staring at the next 7 months of winter that are coming for us.
It really is the winter's coming moment this year, isn't it?
So, Stu, I'm interested in what you just said about I never thought I was going to be a writer. And then obviously you've done it and you've had incredible success with it as well. So how did that change come about in terms of whatever you were doing before to then writing best-selling novels?
That like writing a best-selling novel's got nothing to do with you. Like as a writer, like I keep saying this and people think I'm being disingenuous, and I'm really not. Like I wrote 7 deaths ultimately thinking it'd be read by 7 people. Like I thought it'd be my family, a couple of my friends, and then my mum again. And because it's such a complicated story, and it was done in quite a complex way, and it asked a lot of the reader, and I just didn't know if that readership was there. And then in terms of like being a bestseller, that's a marketing team, right? That's like your publisher putting their weight behind it and saying, actually, we believe in this book. They're the ones who design the cover. The cover catches people's attention. They're the ones who go and woo the booksellers and convince the booksellers to get it in front of the booksellers to sell this, hand over it. So that's how 7 Deaths went. 7 Deaths did have a nice marketing campaign, but it also had great word of mouth. And that was kind of the campaign from the beginning, that they wanted it in as many people's hands as possible. They wanted booksellers raving about it and telling customers about it. And that's what happened. So it's had a really long tail. It's still selling quite well. I just can't say enough, because I think people come to me in events and festivals and they think there's some magic key that like it's not just writing a book, but you can somehow write a bestseller. And you can't. You can just write a book and then trust your team to do the rest for you and trust that they're brilliant at their jobs, and my team were. So that's fantastic. The journey is just, I say, like, the books I loved were Agatha Christie books when I was 8 years old, right? I read them all back to back, loved them, internalized them, and still to this day, that is what a book should be. That structure, that way even every other sort of book, I read a lot of literary fiction now, and even now, that structure is still the primary structure for me, the Agatha Christie structure of books. You give each character a bit of time, you watch them interact, you kill somebody, see how they react, and then work out who did it. So I read all those, loved them. I knew I wanted to write one of those, right? So I'll put it that way. Like I wanted to write one of those style of books, but I didn't want to be an author. I don't know if that makes sense. I wanted to write that style, but I never thought I'd have a career writing books. So I kind of went away and just, I don't know. I feel like it was the flag in the distance. Like I wanted to write an Agatha Christie style mystery. And I attempted it when I was 21. And it was god awful. Like I couldn't write. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the talent. I didn't have the education. I just couldn't do it. So I went away and became a journalist. And I traveled, did all these other things. Just enjoying my life, mate. I was very privileged. in the sense that it wasn't. I know a lot of people want to become authors, and it kind of
Mm.
slightly taints everything else they do. They don't enjoy the other things they're doing because they want to be an author so badly, and everything else is in the shadow of that goal.
Mm.
Whereas for me, because I didn't want that, I was just enjoying everything I was doing. I was enjoying traveling. I was a travel journalist for ages. I was a technology journalist for ages. I worked with brilliant people, and I learned, crucially, like I learned how to edit. I learned how to write to structure and hit deadlines. Didn't help me with the second book, but you know what I'm saying. So all those things were just there, and it was just this sort of passive education as I went through.
Mm.
And then I just had the idea. So the Agatha Christie book that had always been sort of like in the distance, I had the idea for that when I was in Dubai. And it was just like, well, fuck, this feels naturally what I'm going to do next. But with no idea about making it my career, like no idea that I'd ever get to write a second novel or a third novel. Just, I'm going to do that thing because I always wanted to do that thing, right? Like, I'll just write that book and then I'll go back to journalism, or I'll do it in the background and I'll carry on. And that's what I did. So we left Dubai, which is where we were living. We came back to London. We we traded. I love this story because it speaks so well to my wife. I met my wife in Dubai, so we worked on the same magazine. She's my girlfriend, and we'd been going out for 9 months, and we lived in a 30th floor apartment overlooking the marina in Dubai, and we went on a holiday for 2 weeks of every month. Right? I tell you all this not to make myself seem like a smug bastard, but just to give you some sense of what was abandoned. And we were earning good money. And when I had the idea for Seven Deaths, I said to her, look, I need to go back to England. I need drizzle. I need the class system. I need country houses. Like, I need all this stuff. I need to do my research. And she was like, yeah, sure. So we went traveling for 6 months and we moved back to London. And we ended up in a 1-bedroom flat above a children's nursery. Right. And every day I'd write to the smell of like screaming children and like stinky nappies wafting up the stairs. This is absolutely true. I was a freelance journalist, so I'd take as much work as I could per week to pay my bills and have a pint with my mates. But then I would stop and then I would write for the rest of the week. So we had no money, like absolutely none. My wife had gone from sort of like this glamorous Dubai life to sort of getting on the tube every morning to go to an office job she hated. And that was the point at which we talk about the writing journey. That was the point where it was like, actually, this book has to do something now. Like, this book can't just come out and I'll just go back to an old life, because actually it turns out we've sacrificed quite a lot for me to get to this point. And that's the point when I began to buckle and just be like, oh fuck, like this is. I felt the pressure that I think a lot of other people feel throughout the course of their life.
So in terms of it doing well, it definitely did do that. It's had, 1,600 reviews, and it won a lot of awards, didn't it?
Yeah,
got a couple there. Costa First Novel Award. So when these started coming in, were you notified that you'd won these awards?
Yeah. So they, I mean, principally they send you an email and say you've been shortlisted, and then they tell you on the night, or they tell you the day before, I think, to make sure you get to the ceremony that you've won it. The Costa, I can't quite remember. The Costa, I think I won. I knew I'd won it a lot earlier.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember being on a train. My editor sent me an email, and it just said, absolutely confidential, do not tell anybody. And I was on a packed train, shoulder to shoulder, which now seems weird. But yeah, I was coming back from Brighton where I'd just done an interview. And I remember opening the email and seeing the slide at the top of it, and below it was just said, you've won the Costa First Novel Award.
Wow.
And all I wanted to do was like leap up and shout and scream and tell everyone on the train, or at least ring my wife. And I couldn't, because it was heaving. And I had to sort of fight my way through to the toilets on the train, close the door behind me, and then she'd be like, Reza. Like, I rang her, I was like, Reza, I've won the Costa. And she was like, you've got a Costa? And I'm like, I've won the Costa first. The strangest conversation with her.
Oh.
And then I had to celebrate, like, quietly, just pumping my fist in the toilet.
Yeah. I did. I mentioned the Costa Awards to someone before that wasn't involved with, writing books, and they were like, well, the coffee place. I'm like, yeah, Costa. They couldn't quite put the connection together.
No, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because you get so used to the idea of like the coffee sponsoring that award that you just like that shit. All my family said about it was like, do you get free coffee for life now? That was the only thing they were interested in.
Yeah. So you had a lot of reviews now and won all these awards for your first book. So do you feel a weight of expectation on the second book, or are you quite comfortable that whatever happens, happens?
No, I don't actually. I think it's kind of a reverse thing, because Seven Deaths did quite well. my concern was always, as I said, like when I was writing Seven Deaths, the concern is actually whether you'll have enough money to support yourself and support your family and pay your bills. I'm pragmatic. I was 36 when it got published. I'm 40 now, so I'm an old dude, and like it's just I don't get too carried away with it. Like my primary concern, is that I can pay my mortgage, and we can go out for dinner, and I can buy my kids shoes. Seven Deaths did that for me, so I don't have to panic about it. Like I can't change what people are expecting from me. I can't do a thing about that. So all I can do is say, sit down and write the book that entertains me day to day, that makes my actual day to day life enjoyable, and kind of pursue the ideas wherever they take me. And I like doing that. That's really good fun. So that's kind of what I restrict my focus to. That's the only bits that I'm going to worry about. Because if I start worrying about what people expect of me or what they want me to do, or whether they think I should have done this, this, or this, or this, like I'll just go insane. Because everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got an opinion on Seven Deaths. Seven Deaths was such a Marmite book from my experience. Some people actually loved that book, and it was their favourite book ever. And some people detested it, and they just detested the ending. They detested what I did with it. And they would like at length, and there's no way you can't take one without taking the other. So I try to take kind of neither. I'm just like, I'm really glad there's a portion of people out there who like it. I understand that people hate it, but that's books, and I'll just go on my merry way.
So Stu, I'm interested. Being a parent now, has that impacted how you see your writing in the future? Like, are you going to write anything for children, or are you aware that your daughter may read your work in the future?
Yeah, well, I've put a dedication. The dedication to my second book is to my daughter. So I write little short stories. So at bedtime at night, we tell her a story, and she can kind of pick how the story goes a little bit. So we do that, and I'm going to write some of them down. I don't know if they'll ever be published. I don't think so, because they're kind of they're for my daughter, right? Like, so I will write them down because I want the family to have these stories, and they're a memento of this time I spent with my daughter and this thing that we had together. It's like we're almost co-writing them. So I don't think I'd ever write for children, because that's you have to be immensely talented to do that job, to sort of tell a story in terms that children and adults can find entertaining. I don't think I've got the talent for that. And I think those books end up being quite visual as well, because obviously there is a visual component to them, and you've got to be aware of that. You've got to be aware of visual metaphor as much as the language that you're using. Also, like, for whatever reason, I can't seem to write a book under 130,000 words, which is a bit of a flaw if you want to be a kid's author, I think. I don't know how I would tell a story in 9 pages. What it has done, I noticed in Devil, is it's put a bit of heart into my work, a little bit, like a little bit of emotion. Seven Deaths is an emotionless creature. It's cogs and wheels. It's about the day. It's about this one day repeating, and it's very sort of structurally interesting. But that's where my focus was. That's my concern. It was on making sure the Agatha Christie plot married up to this innovative structure, and that those things held together. And emotion was like 4th or 5th down on my list of things. And my editor sort of bullied me into putting emotion into it. She was the one who was like, actually, you need to have a feeling here. Like, these characters should be, let's talk about what they're feeling there. And it came in after the fact. So it's in there now. It's in there as a novel, but it wasn't in there in my first, second, third draft. It was something that came through the editing. Whereas Devil has got a lot more emotion in it just from the start. Like, it's got a mother-daughter relationship in there. It's all about partnerships of various degrees. It's about a husband and a wife. It's about a Sherlock Holmes and Watson style partnership. It's about boyfriend, girlfriend, almost. Like, all these different relationships are teased out of it. And I think that has got a lot to do with my daughter being born, because she was, what was that? I started writing it about a month before she was born, and I think I finished it 2 days after her second birthday. So that gives you a span of like her. She is that book effectively. She rearing her and looking after her and raising her is the story of that book for me. And like, so my feelings for her suffuse that book. Like, they are kind of in everything. So it's a much gentler story, I think, than Seven Deaths, and it's a much more mellow piece of writing with a lot more heart to it. And the characters are generally led by emotion, much more than in Seven Deaths, where they were led by plot.
Well, Waterstones is has put a little thing up on their website, and it says the Devil and the Dark Water is a deliciously sinister period chiller set on a blighted sea voyage. Didn't sound massively heartwarming.
Well, it's still me.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it's
know.
by
I know.
degrees, isn't it? So, like, it's 10% more heartwarming than anything I would have written, but it's still like 90% less heartwarming than any other book you're ever going to read. Lots of people still die, and it's still quite. It's still quite
It
dark.
sounds really interesting.
So, Stu, we've got some staple questions that we ask on the Writing Community Chat Show. And I kind of think you've already answered one of them, but I'm going to ask you it anyway, just to see if it changes. So one of the questions is, if you could take any character that exists in fiction and make it your own and have a crack at that character, and do whatever you want with it, which character would it be and why?
You see, you're right. Like, I think I'm doing that anyway. Like, I think the Seven Deaths was my spin on Agatha Christie. Like, straight off, I stole most of the tropes, and then my idea was, I'm an Agatha Christie reader, so what would I be expecting this book to do next? And I tried to do the reverse of that. I constantly tried to sort of wrong foot expectations on that book. This is the same. Like, Devil is my spin on Sherlock Holmes. I have a massive problem with Sherlock Holmes. Like, I read all of those books, and I always loved the adventure and the stories, but I hated Sherlock Holmes. Thought he was a dick, and I hated how everybody. It's weird. Like, you'll notice, or I noticed, every adaptation of Sherlock Holmes takes the same beat of trying to make Sherlock Holmes more human. That is the overall arc of his character, because the books don't do it. The books, he's a tool from book one to the final book, but everybody talks about him being amazing and he's this great guy. And he doesn't. He only ever takes cases out of intellectual curiosity. Like, if you were just a poor bugger on the street who'd watched his wife be run over, but it wasn't interesting to Sherlock Holmes, he'd leave you be. So I, even as a kid reading those books, I had a problem with that. I had a problem with him as a character. I had a problem with, like, Dr. Watson, right? Like, Dr. Watson's brilliant. He's a doctor. He's a war hero. And nobody addresses it. Everybody's just like, Watson, what a buffoon. What? Lestrade is in charge of the world's foremost policing unit. And everybody acts like he's an idiot who couldn't find a cat up a tree. Like, it doesn't make sense. It drives me insane. So yeah, like, and again, the Sherlock Holmes powers, his powers of deduction, add up their best in the first 3 pages when he's working out who's coming to his door. Then he doesn't do them after that. He just like spots things written on walls that everyone else has mysteriously missed. Sorry, this is a rant about Sherlock Holmes.
No, crack on. I'm enjoying that.
So there's all these things. So my love for Christie is a pure love, and my love for Sherlock Holmes is more into. I love the stories and the ideas of it, but I struggle with the character. So I think it is that. I think Devil is my attempt to sort of like do what I do to Sherlock Holmes. He's like, my version of Sherlock Holmes is a guy called Sammy Pipps, and he's humble. Like, in this story, he starts the book off in chains. He's a prisoner, and you don't know what he's done, and it's left to his Watson-style sidekick to solve the mystery in his stead. So that was me again, elevating the sidekick and kind of exploring what being stood next to a genius would do to a sidekick. Like, you couldn't possibly ever believe yourself clever if you stood next to a genius all day, right? Like, you figured the person who worked with Einstein in his lab was probably a genius as well, but they wouldn't feel it. They wouldn't believe themselves clever because this person would take up all the space in the room. So it's kind of exploration of that. So long-winded answer to your question. I feel like my 2 books so far are doing that, than me sort of plucking out these characters, changing the names. So
have you got any other gripes that you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to tackle that as well?
Oh, hundreds, mate. Hundreds of gripes, mate. Like, I'm just filled with them. Yeah. I never know them. Like, it's weird. The Sherlock Holmes thing wasn't like me wandering through my life being like, one day I'll take a crack at Holmes and change the things I don't like. It was just when I started writing those stories, because I had, as I say, I had the seafaring bit from the true story. And when I started thinking about putting a mystery on there, Sherlock Holmes seemed like the ideal fit for a seafaring mystery. Like, you wouldn't have Poirot on there, right? Like, it's not his kind of investigation. It doesn't work.
Columbo.
Whereas, whereas a haunted boat is very Sherlock Holmes. So that's kind of why he ended up there. And then that's when I began to realise that me and Sherlock Holmes did not see eye to eye. So who knows? Maybe starting when I'm, a bit further into book 3, I'll just be like, hang on a minute. There's things here I need to address.
Do you think that all your adventures and the explorations that you've gone on is why you keep wanting to write sort of in those time periods where it's a bit more, humans were a bit more adventurous and more was on the line?
Yeah, I think It's a good question. I mean, I wrote Seven Deaths in the 20s in that house because Agatha Christie wrote her books in the 20s in a house. So I felt like the period of her stories that I loved the most. So that's why I took that one. And then, as I said before, Devil and Darkwater is a seafaring book because actually it was based on a real thing. So like, it was a Dutch ship. So this is a Dutch ship. It had like Dutch characters on. So this is the Dutch characters, and a lot of the historical period I've taken from that period. Because when I started researching that real life event, it was such good stuff to have in a story. So it's not really a conscious choice I'm making. It's not like, oh, I've travelled a lot and blah blah blah. But this, I mean, my third book is going to be historical as well. But again, not really a conscious choice, just because I think overall, writing in period gives you can strip away technology, and technology is quite an easy shortcut for a lot of mystery. So I don't give myself that. It gives you, your characters have to earn every piece of information through being cleverer than the person they're investigating. And if you're plotting, you just have to do that. If you're in period, they can't just look something up. So therefore, as a writer, you can't say they just looked something up. Like, you've got to earn everything. So I think maybe that's why I enjoy it. But yeah, next time I talk to you guys, I'll have a better answer for that because I've never really thought about it.
And the second staple question we have on the show is, if you could change the ending to any novel you've ever read, which novel would that be and why?
Oh, bloody hell. Jesus, what's got an ending I don't like? What's weird, there's a lot of books where I want maybe Dracula, weirdly. Like, that's a weird, because we turned him into, modern culture turned Dracula into a sort of like, well, we did a lot of poor things to Dracula, didn't we? But we've turned him into an anti-hero, and then we've turned an entire, like, the cult of vampirism, and now we've got people who think it's cool to be a vampire, and Dracula in the actual book was just kind of this horrible, dank creature, like slightly romantic and yearning after his lost love, but like much more sort of like initially horrific, and then gets killed at the end. I'd be quite curious if we'd never done that. I wonder if we just wouldn't have to deal with like the culture of vampires. It's so boring and it's used so much, and I just wish like it'd be quite good. I wonder if like Dracula's ending had been serialized. So there was like 40 of those books, and we all got sick of it back then. And we were just like, oh God, we're so sick of that. And then we didn't have this massive culture of vampires. And because it's just like, he's a good monster, but he's not the best monster. And we just like, we keep going back to that well. And I'd quite like to see that end. So maybe for historical, just to save us from vampires, I'd change the end to Dracula and make it a series. So we could all got bored of it in like 1810 or whenever it was released.
Love it.
Yeah, it definitely influenced the Twilight kind of films, I guess, isn't it? You know, with the romance. But I'm definitely not in that fan group. You've asked what other questions? Staple questions, Krish?
You can get onto some of the more fun ones, I suppose.
Well, okay. We haven't asked this for a while, but let's do it. Stu, are you a fan of pineapple on pizza or not?
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
Oh, God, what horrible person put pineapple on a pizza?
This guy.
Legitimately. Oh my God. All of our politics, every terrible thing that's happening, this is the worst thing I've heard of. Just none of the rest even compares to pineapple on a pizza. That is dreadful. No.
Yes, that is a moral victory for me.
I feel like I'm in the shame box right now.
All the guests come on and they agree with him all the time.
It's the majority.
I can't be an author anymore. I can't look people in the eye knowing that they put their pineapple on pizza. I can't have a conversation knowing that moral rot is in them.
Star Wars or Star Trek? Oh, we missed you there.
Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Star Trek's about hope and optimism. At its best, it's about hope and optimism and a better world, and it's about exploration rather than war. And Star Wars is about war in the very, very definition of it, and it's about a few chosen people with extraordinary abilities, you know, and then a load of like goons who help them out. And it's just you can tell like the Star Wars for me is a flawed thing because the best character who came out of it's Han Solo, and he's the character who rejects kind of everything that's going on, but then is ultimately swept up in all the heroism and ends up becoming a hero himself. It's just a boring narrative that we've seen a million times. Star Trek is brilliant for me because it's a brilliant. It can dip into anything it wants. It can be a legal drama 1 minute. It can be an adventurous series, but generally they win by. I mean, I'm a Next Generation fan, and he wins by argument and logic and persuasion most of the time. And I think that's a wonderful thing for a show to do. And growing up, like seeing a hero who was just about being clever, it's a Doctor Who sort of thing. Just like he wins by being clever most of the time, and that's like a great thing to be telling kids and young adults that you don't have to pick up a sword, you don't have to pick up a gun and shoot your way out of these things. There are other ways to do things. So for me, more interesting stories, often better told, and they don't always fall back on the same tropes that Star Wars falls back on. Star Trek, please.
Elvis or the Beatles? Neither.
So I grew up with everybody saying, where are you from? And I'd say Liverpool just because it's easier for people to.
Oh, remember some more technical difficulties once again. We've lost Stu. Chris, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Stu is frozen in time, and I think that pineapple comment really, caught him up there. If Stu comes back, we'll just finish the interview up. But he has frozen. I'm not sure if he can hear us or not. He's buffering, and he's back. We lost you a moment there, Stu, and he's frozen. Oh, we've done pretty well, Chris. We've had quite a few shows now without any difficulties at all. So we only due a slip up, at some point. But it's been a great interview so far, and I've really enjoyed the chats that we've been having. And we're talking about the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle earlier. Is Stu's first book. It's had 1,605 reviews, and it's 4.1 out of 5 stars, which is just incredible. And we kind of underplayed the awards that he won. The Costa Awards is a massive thing. The Bag Novel Award, Waterstone's still a book. Oh, he's back. Hello, Stu.
My internet just completely cut out for no reason whatsoever. It just stopped working. So
it tends to happen.
Yeah.
So we were just going back over Evelyn Hardcastle and the reviews it's had, how well it's done, just when you popped off the show. And Chris, were you going to say something before I interrupt you?
Yeah. So, Stu, what is the successful career for you going to look like? Like when you look back, I know it sounds morbid, but from just about as you approach the grave, when you look backwards, what are you going to be happy with as an author?
Fucking hell. Again, this is not. It's weird, this, right? Like, this is generally not the way I think about my life at all. Like, I've always just done the thing directly ahead of me. I'm not a long-term planner or strategizer or thinker. I don't think I've got that capability. I think I just want to be. I know there's a bad book in my future because I think there's a bad book in everyone's future. I hopefully haven't written it yet. And by bad book, I mean the 2 books I've written, whether readers like them or not, they were exactly the book I wanted to write, so I can be proud of them. The bad book is the book where I have the idea and I don't get I spend years writing, it doesn't do the thing that I want it to do. The characters don't become the people I want them to become. So it fails my own sort of internal audit of it. So hopefully I would love to not write that book. That would be my absolute dream, to get to the end of my career having made a living, and a good living, I hope, selling books to people and entertaining people and writing, good books that I can support my family and do everything I want for them and give them everything I want to give them. But also always, whether the book sells or not, knowing that it was the best book I could have written and it did everything I wanted to do and I never compromised. Like, the other problem I have is that so I missed a lot of deadlines for Devil, but a lot of that was because I was like, this book isn't doing the thing I want it to be doing yet. I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board. And I think that's frustrating people around me. But at the end of the day, the book comes out and it's got my name on the front of it in big fucking letters. Like, you can't mistake who wrote that bastard. So I want to be proud of it. I want to see it on the bookshelf and not look at it with regret, not look at it and think, oh, that was the one that got away from me. So at the end, in 6 years, when I'm lying on my deathbed, and I've got 3 books, that's all I want. No, it's not. I want to be living in a luxurious bed in a beautiful house with enough money to sustain myself, but then just be like,
yeah. So Stephen King talking about those ideas that maybe are too big for you yet, and that book that gets away. Stephen King mentioned that with a lot of his books that he had the idea early on, but he didn't think he had the sort of talent to pull it off. Have you had any ideas like that yet, where you're thinking, yeah, that's a great idea, but not yet?
Like, it will never be any more complicated than that. I don't think it will ever be. And not, this makes me sad. It's not what I mean, but like, I'll never write a book as ambitious as that. Like, what that was trying to do in terms of the structure of the novel, actually tell a murder mystery with a time travel element. Because if you just think about the base problem of that, murder mystery with the time travel element means you've got a time traveling detective who can go back to the beginning of the day, follow the victim around all day, and see who killed her. That's a very difficult problem to solve. And you've got to either tie yourself in narrative loops to fix it, or you find a direct way to solving it, which is hopefully what I did in the end. So, as a problem to start your book with, I don't think I'll ever meet a challenge like that ever again. So, no, I think because that was the book that got me started, and that was the book that launched all of this. I can't ever see having a knottier problem. So, no, and also it's not like I have 10 ideas lined up. Like, I've got 4 ideas lined up. So I've just sold 2 more books to Bloomsbury Raven, my publisher.
Nice.
And I pitched those books so I know exactly what they're going to be, and I know what they're about and what they're going to do. Sorry, that's my agent trying to call me. Apologies. That can never be good. If my agent's ringing me on a Sunday morning, that's probably not a great sign. He's probably like, do you know you're on the writing show? I'm talking, Stu. Stop talking. That's confidential information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't I've got my 4 books, and then after that we'll see what happens. But mate, I could write 4 books and then just be like, actually, this is other thing over here. Because I'd love to go and write a video game at some point in my life. I'd love to do that. I'd love to write to the stage. So that may be the next stage of my career.
Awesome.
So are you a big gamer then?
Yeah. But one of my friends pointed out that 7 Deaths is basically a serialization of an old LucasArts point-and-click adventure game from the early 90s. And I was like, that's a serialized Maniac Mansion is effectively what I've done. It's but I absolutely love video games, and they're in the same pot of inspiration that television, movies, books, Christie, Sherlock Holmes. It's all in the same stew. And I do find a lot of video game stuff tends to come out in my novels. Like, there's a lot of those sorts of methods for drawing attention, including things like mini bosses and lives. Almost a lot of those things that sort of come into the book.
All right, Stu, we're going to have to wrap up soon as we're approaching the end of time, and obviously your publisher's calling you for a reason. If we can have a little sentence about why people should go and have a look out for your new book that's out on October 1st, and where they can go and get that and pre-order it now.
Well, please go out and read Devil in the Dark Water, because it took me 2 years to write, and it nearly killed me, and it'd be lovely if people actually read it. I also just think it's a really good, entertaining, fun, page-turning book. So, you will not waste your time reading it. It's just going to be... I think it's a fun way to spend your time. Also, it's about Sherlock Holmes, a Sherlock Holmes character, on a haunted boat investigating a demon. So who doesn't want that, right?
Sounds fantastic.
You can buy it from the special editions. There's loads of special editions, more special editions than standard versions, it seems like. You can go to Waterstones and you can buy it there, and you'll get beautiful one type of sprayed edge with some extra bonus material at the back of the book that they asked for. You can go to Forbidden Planet, which has got a very different sprayed edge, and you're in a chance for winning, I think, a compass with that one. That's incredibly beautiful. You can get it from Goldsboro Books, and they've got a limited run of 500 copies, first print, usual brilliant Goldsboro stuff that they do. I've signed a bunch for Blackwell's and The Independent. So if you want to go and support your local bookstore, which I highly recommend you do, they should be able to get you a signed edition as well. So, and all these ones are signed. So if that means something to you and it matters to something, you can go there. But basically, my publisher they'll almost thrown it through your window at this point. So you're probably going to get a copy whether you want it or not.
Amazing. Well, it does sound fantastic, and honestly, we wish you all the best for its success. And we'll be sending a tweet out for the book on launch day. If you just remind, well, you don't have to remind us. It's only a few days away now. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I hope it does really well, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Me on, guys. I really appreciate it, and thanks for opening with the erotica. That's marvelous. You really got the morning off to a great start.
Yeah, I'll let everyone know how that goes. Thank you, Jay Martin, for sponsoring us with that book as well. And have a great weekend, guys. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, and Stu, I've got it on my Kindle, so that's what I'm going to spend my Sunday doing. Can't wait.
Erotica.
Not the erotica. But no, I've got that one. Yeah, on my Kindle, so I'll be reading that today.
Really, really hope you enjoy it. And if you don't, just lie to me.
Thank you.
No worries. See you later. Bye.